Okay, well, a quick note on that. They are speeding up with H4 EAD processing. Now, I
Oh,
know it was terrible. I think we talked about this before. We filed like 25 lawsuits, right?
yeah.
Delay lawsuits last year. But now we're seeing them meet their 5 to 6 month processing
Oh,
kind of
okay.
promised at the California Service Center. So
Oh.
that's just an FYI. Number two.
Um, Hi, everyone. We know we were initially planning to do a YouTube live with this, but we went through some technical difficulties. So we wanted to still make sure that we answered all the questions that you had sent our way. And hopefully we'll do another Insta live with Sameer soon. But thank you so much for your patience. You will have this video. So hopefully you get all your questions answered. So Sameer, thank you so much for joining. For anyone who's new today, Sameer is an immigration lawyer. He's nationally ranked and he owns Banyan Law Firm. He also runs something called Immigration Office Hours, which is on-demand immigration services to get your questions answered. As for It's OKR, if you're new today, It's OKR is a content platform for South Asian immigrants, and we aim to educate, entertain, and empower them. We're going to make sure that we use the 30 minutes wisely. So we are going to straight dive into the questions that you sent our way. So the first one, Sameer, should we get started? Is there
Yeah, let's do
anything
it.
that I missed?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's good.
And
Thank you so much, Priya.
and we'll begin with the questions, but I will make sure that I link all of Sameer's details in the description so that if you want to get in touch with him or your law or his law firm, you can do that. I know with a lot of these questions, we had also received how do we get in touch with the lawyer? So we will make sure you have that information in the description box. Okay. So Sameer, the first question, are you able to help us understand the process after getting selected for H1B for an H4 visa holder? So just for a little bit of context, we got a lot of questions saying that I am on H4 visa today and I've received my H1B. Is the process the same as how anyone else gets their
Mhm.
H1B, or is the process a little different? So if you can share some light on that and the steps, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, this can be super quick. It's the same, right? What is an H1B? It's a visa, right? And if you're selected, the company files a petition for you and asks one of two things: to either change your current status to H1B, or to approve the H1B to allow you to process at a consulate, right? Those are the two ways. So it's the same for H4 visa holders. You change from H4 to H1B. Or you just ask the government to allow you to process your H1B by going and get stamped, right? So in other cases, so whether you're an F1, an O1, an L1, whatever, TN, H4, it's all the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying there are two processes, just so that I understand correctly.
Hmm.
One is change of status, and the other is you go out of the country and come back on H1B stamped, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And is there a preferred one that is there, or what would you
Well,
recommend at
given
this
the
time?
state of consulates right now, I would imagine it would be the change of status, right? And so the important thing to keep in mind there are the dates. The H1B cannot be approved for a date earlier than October 1st, right?
Okay.
That's the beginning of the fiscal year. So if it's a change of status, that's going to be the start date. So you just need to make sure you can show you have status up until that date, right?
Okay.
So your H4 I-94 needs to be valid for at least up until that date, if not beyond.
Okay. Got it. Makes sense. The next question is, how many days does it take for an H1B petition to get approved?
Well, if it's premium processed, right, then 15 days, hopefully, if there's no RFE, yeah, or less. We've just got, our H1B premium process cases are being approved in a matter of a few days. So it's pretty quick. If it's not premium processed, historically, the government can take anywhere from 1 to 4 months in usual cases. It honestly depends on their bandwidth in any given year.
Okay.
So that's what we've seen for the last couple of years. However, before that, it would often stretch to way beyond that.
Okay.
It used to be anywhere from 4 to 8 or 10 months, something, crazy like that. So
Okay.
it really just depends on how slammed they are.
Okay. And does it depend on the processing center or where it has gone? Does that make a difference?
Well, yeah, but you can't choose where to send it, right? You're required to send it to a location based on the company headquarters, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it depends on kind of how busy that particular office is. So
Okay, got it.
they're pretty good nowadays. They're pretty good.
Like based on, I know the backlogs was super crazy earlier. Is that improving? Are you seeing that get better now
Yeah, but these backlogs weren't necessarily for
for
H1B type
H1B?
cases,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so it should be okay. It shouldn't be terrible.
Okay, got it. The next question is, what is the PERM processing timeline? Like, I know we've received a lot of these questions because a lot of our followers are generally waiting to file for their H4 EAD, and they can only do that if they have their I-140. And a lot of the spouses are just in the process where their PERM has been filed. So I think the big question that we get is, what is the PERM processing timeline generally?
Once a perm is filed, right? Generally takes 5 to 6 months.
Okay.
So now a very minority of cases are audited. If a case is audited, it can be random, so it may not be anybody's fault. It is what it is. That happens less than 5% of the time. But if it does happen, unfortunately, it can stretch the processing out to about a year.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay, so 1 year is, it can stretch if there is an audit, otherwise it is 4 to 6 months.
It's about 5 or 6 months right now.
5 or 6 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other one is, my I-140 was filed through a consultancy. Is it mandatory for me to stick with them for 6 months as per law?
6 months from when, right? That's the big question. So
Okay.
the law, okay, so there's no 6 month law. Like
Okay.
that is a recommendation that we put in place to help people stay compliant with the law, which is you're supposed to have the intent to work for the company that sponsored you for a green card once you get your green card, right?
Okay.
So to show down the line, maybe at a citizenship interview, that you did have that intent, it's better to stay with that company once you get your green card. It's better to stay with that company for about 6 months than it is for about one day, right? But once again, there is no 6 month requirement. It's just kind of a number that we've all somehow settled on as a
Okay.
really, really safe way to show that you are, showing that that was your intent, was to work with them. What if you leave? Like, what if you leave companies, right? What if you get your green card and you leave right away? I've never heard of anybody getting in trouble for that. But
Good to
at
know.
the same time, you never know. Like the government could hold it against you, most likely at a citizenship interview.
Okay, got it. Okay, super helpful. And the next one is, if you are most likely receiving your H4 EAD at the end of next year, is it viable to change your status from H4 to F1 this year?
Okay, I'm trying to parse this one out here. So if you're most likely receiving your EAD at the end of next year, so end of 2023,
3, yes.
which EAD are we talking about? The green card
The,
based EAD?
the H4 EAD.
So if you are likely to receive your H4 EAD at that time, that means you've already applied for an H4.
Yes.
You can't get an EAD without applying. Okay, so the person, but why so long? I guess is the question.
No,
Like,
so I think for a lot of people,
yeah,
basically like the H4 EAD backlog is really high. It's still
yeah,
taking like 8 to 12 months, especially if it's in the California processing center. So I think the question here
mm,
is that I've applied for it, or maybe like their spouses they are expecting their spouses I-140 to come by the end of this year. By the
I
time they
see.
do the application and everything, they're hoping like they'll get it
Yeah.
end of 2023. In the meantime, is it recommended that they change their status from H4 to F1?
Okay. Well, a quick note on that. They are speeding up with H4 EAD processing. Now, I
Oh,
know it was terrible. I think we talked about this before. We filed like 25 lawsuits, right?
yeah.
Delay lawsuits last year. But now we're seeing them meet their 5 to 6 month processing
Oh,
kind of
okay.
promised at the California Service Center. So
Oh,
that's just an FYI. Number two, sure. I mean, you can change from H4 to F1. If you do, then the H4 goes away, the EAD goes away too, right? And now you're in the F1 process, right? The F1 process requires that you'd be attending school and kind of, complying with the terms of the university and the student visa, right? And you cannot get your H4 EAD anymore, right? That's
Okay.
for a separate visa status.
Okay, I think that's good to know, because I think the person was thinking that they moved to F1 and in the meantime, their EAD is still in process. And
But
then
why
they
would you?
want
Why would one do that? Like you move to F1 to go to school, but you can go to school as an H4.
H4. Okay, yeah, that's a good point,
And
actually.
the
Okay,
reason to go to F1 is because you get an LPT at the end. But if you can get an EAD, then why do you need an
I do.
LPT?
That's a good point. That's a good
Yeah,
point. Super,
yeah,
super helpful.
yeah.
The big one, of course, it's the season. So is there a
Mhm.
second round of H1B lottery announcements coming anytime soon?
No, not that we know of. They're not gonna. They don't tell us until they tell us. And
Okay.
I honestly, if my advice to people would be not to put too much, hope, in being picked in that. We've had the highest number of lottery entrants this year. The chances of getting picked in a second or third draw are super, super low. And also, we just don't know when they're gonna, if and when they're gonna be announced until they actually are announced. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. Okay. The next one is I did my MS in construction engineering in the US and I'm working on F1. Can I change to H4 to get newer opportunities in other industries and then try for an H1B again? So looks like this person has a degree in construction engineering and are working on F1, but they're looking to change their industry. So their big question is that, can I change to H4? Work in different industries and then apply for H1. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so like the F1 requires you to work in your field, right? Like in
Yes.
your degree field. So I think what this person is saying is, if I can change to H4, then maybe I can work in another area. And absolutely, you have to have an H4 EAD to work. And for that to happen, your spouse has to have the I-140, right? But assuming all those factors are met, you can certainly change to H4 EAD. And once the EAD comes through, you can work and you can do whatever you want. You can work in any field you like to. And then of course you're an H4, so you can try for the H1B as many times as you can. So
So like, and if they apply, and if they, for example, apply for H1B,
mhm.
will it matter that they had a
Mm.
construction engineering degree and now they are trying to
Yeah,
pursue a marketing degree? Will that be an issue?
yeah. I mean, the H1B, once again, you have to have. It must be for a job that's related to like your specialty degree, right? But it's not as limited as the requirement for the OPT, right? The OPT is like it has to be so close, right? But in the real world for the H1B, if you can make the argument that maybe a degree in construction engineering is related to the field that you want to work in,
Okay.
and can in theory be a requirement, and in fact some companies do require it, but like maybe you're working in sales now, but knowledge of engineering is super helpful. You could still do that for the H1B. So it depends. Like you would need somebody to kind of like look specifically at your
Okay.
degree and the job that you're looking at to advise.
Got it. Okay, the next one, of course, I know we touched upon this a little bit. These days, stamping is a hassle. How safe is it to make appointments as TCN?
Um, it's pretty safe, I would say. It really, once again, depends on the visa type, what country you're talking about. Um, I'm seeing a lot of people doing TCN appointments now in countries where there is availability. There's thinking of there's some organization, I can't remember what that is, that's helping Indian nationals get visas in Mexico right now.
Hmm.
And maybe I can try to find that for you guys, but it worked okay. TCNs are never a guarantee, right? They can always issue a 221G. And if they do, you can get your passport back, but then you have to go get stamped, back home in India after that. And that of course, as this person is saying, is an absolute hassle. So there's always a degree of risk when it comes to TCNs. You just have to be aware of that risk and be able to plan around that in case it were happening.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then last couple of ones. What if someone has studied and worked in the States, but now is living in a different country? Can they directly apply for a green card? And they have a EU passport.
Yeah, I mean, you can apply for a green card, or you can be sponsored for a green card, or sponsor yourself for a green card, whether you're here or outside the country.
Okay.
So the mannerism in which you change to green card status differs, right? Like if you're an H1B here and the green card's approved, your status adjusts automatically, right? But if you're outside the country, then the way you get your green card is once you reach the appropriate stage, you have to go to the interview at the consulate, receive your immigrant visa, and then enter to get your green card. But yeah, certainly you can apply for it when you're not here.
Okay, when you're not here. Okay.
Mhm.
And last one, and I would love to just learn a little more about this. Are
Mhm.
Indians eligible for EB2 NIW? Can you explain what the NIW is, and if Indians are
Yeah.
eligible, or why they're, if they're not, then what's the reason?
Well, they absolutely are,
I don't know.
but they
Okay.
generally
Cool.
don't get anything out of applying for it. The reason is because the NIW is a national interest waiver. It waives one from having to go through the PERM process, basically, right? And the reason is threefold. Like number one, you show you're working in an area of intrinsic national merit, like an area that's of national interest, climate change, curing diseases, things like that, right? The typical fields. Um, Number two, you show that you are well positioned to advance that national interest, maybe more so than many others, right? There's something about your background that's above and beyond the kind of the rank and file employees in that field, and so you can advance the national interest. And then number three, you have to show that it's very difficult for you to go through the PERM process, right? Maybe your field you work as independent consultants, and so you can't do PERM or visa sponsorship. Maybe you typically work for companies that don't do that, right? Maybe you're a founder and you can't do a PERM for yourself, right? If those three elements are met, you can do a national interest waiver. But what does that give you? It gives you an EB2. So it's not that Indians aren't eligible for it. It's like EB2 doesn't help. You already have an EB2. So how would that help you, right? So it's a misconception that Indians are ineligible for it. It just doesn't. It's not helpful to Indians. It's helpful to like other nationalities that maybe can skip the PERM process and go directly to EB2, and they're current, right? So
Yeah, got
that's the
it.
distinction. Yeah.
That's super helpful. That was the last question. Hopefully, we would have been able to do this live and get a couple of more questions, but next time, and we understand that's the name of our channel. It's OKR because things happen. So appreciate your time, Sameer. I know it's also like the long weekend, so I hope you're doing something fun. And for everyone else, I hope some of your questions got answered. We will try to do another live one with Sameer so that we can get more questions. But we will share all the details about Sameer below. So go check that out. And thank you so much again for following It's OKR. Please like, share, and subscribe, and go to @It's OKR on Instagram and follow us there. We share a ton of content for all South Asian immigrants living abroad. Thank you, Sameer, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And
Thank you so much.
I'm so sorry about the technical glitches. I appreciate
No,
the extra
it's all
time.
good. All good. Thank you so much
Okay.
for having me. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.